My name's Debbie Schultz. I've worked, if anyone who's been in the discussion forums before know that I'm part of the NSTF team. I do a lot of the communication, in particular with regards to the discussion forums and the write-up afterwards. Anyway, so that's me and where I'm at. The questions that have been asked, there have been some in the main chat and there have been some in the chat function. I'm going to quickly just go to the chat function, which shows which Jared, who had to leave unfortunately because he had a prior commitment, has been able to respond as well. And I'm going to actually read them through and give a chance for the other panelists to respond if they want to any of his comments. And also look through what one of the attendees also have their hands up and do that as well. So let's possibly first start with the attendees who have their hands up. I'm just trying to see who that is. Gilbert. Gilbert, would you like to start? Let's just start with a question from Gilbert.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Gilbert Lekwe. I've got a question for the panelists, and thank you for the wonderful presentation and the wonderful opportunity regarding this challenge of load shedding. But I've got a couple of questions. The first question is, I want to ask the few speakers who spoke, do they take nuclear as part of green energy or clean? Do they consider nuclear as part of clean energy? And then also the land use regarding the renewable energy, wind and solar farms. Do they consider the land use to be very environmental? Because a lot of trees need to be removed for both solar panels and wind turbines. Also, Eskom released an article a few months ago about considering to charge solar users more because when they go back to the grid, it takes more effort to power them back. Thank you.
Gilbert, before you go, could you just say where you're from? Just tell us a little bit about where you're from, and then we'll let the presenter speak and other people.
Okay, I work for NEXA. I'm a nuclear scientist by profession, but I'm attending on my own capacity.
Thanks so much, Gilbert. I'm going to put you on mute. If you need to speak, just let me know. The first question, which is nuclear seen as part of clean energy? Who would like to respond to that?
I'm willing to respond.
Go for it.
Thank you. Firstly, I mean, there are quite a number of people who would disagree with me, but if you look at this graph that I shared a while ago, I would argue that nuclear energy is clean. Now, if you look at Fukushima and that's all you focus on, you would say, no, hang on, this is not so safe. But if you look at the whole picture across the world in terms of deaths per whatever parameter you choose, which is fair across all energy sources, then nuclear energy is clean and it is safe. It is unfortunately not cheap. And there are contexts where nuclear energy makes a lot of sense. Some countries where there are no renewable sources, in some countries requiring concentrated baseload for a particular application, it has its place. So it definitely is, in my opinion, a clean energy, but it is not always the right thing to do in every context. If you are blessed or inundated with renewable sources, think again, let the numbers speak. So lastly, the latest generation of nuclear energy plants are even safer than the ones that give us these numbers. Small modular, which have the promise of bringing down the cost into, let's say, the region of renewable plus storage. Again, I want to reiterate what the Robert Bryce said. If you are pro-green, anti-nuclear, you probably will have to consider being pro-blackout. That's point number one. Point number two, if it comes to the footprint, if I could touch on the three questions, otherwise I must pause and give on someone else a chance perhaps.
No, go for it. Touch on the three questions and then we'll open it up to other people.
Right. In terms of the footprint, yes, if you compare a 900 odd megawatt power plant, nuclear plant, its footprint with the equivalent in solar and so on. But I mean, you have to really look at the context again. And I want to just touch on what Thomas said. Thomas, you are so right by saying if you have X a requirement, you can only make so much while the sun is shining. So you need to get 3 to 5 times that. However, households can do a 1x, 1/3 x. Being 1/3 being the battery. If you shift and you manage your profile, look at shopping malls. There's such a lot of business, office environments. You need a smallish battery there to just help you with the power outage, with the blackouts, and so on, load shedding. So one can be very, very clever with this, and the numbers are there. They are, beyond doubt. But then again, in terms of the footprint, so on the roofs of houses, big buildings, dead spaces we have, and so on, it is not necessary to forfeit prime land for these kind of applications. And lastly, if anybody is concerned about the footprint, the wind turbine up there or the solar plant somewhere, don't compare that with green pastures. If you want energy, look at the equivalent. I always say an open cast coal mine is the most terrible sight for eyes that there possibly is. So why do you compare that with green pastures? If you want energy, take the next best option and look at all the parameters. And then lastly, as far as the grid is concerned, one problem I have, Thomas, with these, with centralized and centralist thinking is that, very soon we're going to produce, we're already almost there, produce, for example, in high solar countries like South Africa, make the solar energy cheaper than it is to wheel it across the grid. The grid wheeling cost is already 25 to 35 cents, and there are countries already making solar for that cost. So there's no reason. I think decentralized thinking and smart microgrids and even smart regional grids. If people will complain about what happened in Germany and elsewhere, give them a break. I mean, they took the lead. They're sorting out those problems. We've had decades of sorting out problems with coal and the rest, and now we're inheriting all the problems of the past. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to add? I'm just trying to see who, Thomas?
Yeah, thanks. I absolutely agree with Rick around a few issues. I see nuclear as clean, not necessarily as green, but that's really a small difference. In terms of nuclear, we should also take into account that it could be that it becomes very viable in terms of small modular reactors over time, and nobody that stands for renewable energy should stand in the way for that if it is safe and if it works well, distributed and affordable. In terms of land use, I mean, if you put up a wind plant, you use about 1% of a piece of land in terms of footprint, and therefore you can carry on with normal agricultural or other purposes of that land without having massive impacts. There's normally a good improvement in the piece of land around infrastructure and security and roads on a piece of land like that, and the farmers welcome that from a hedging their income perspective. In the Eastern Cape, for instance, one of our landowners where we built a wind farm said in the last few years during the drought, they were carried by the lease from the wind farm, which enabled them to buy food in for their animals. Otherwise, they had to slaughter them, and that carried them through the drought. So there's pros and cons of it. I think just in terms of a bird and bat, of course, always an issue, and stuff like elephants, things like that. That's why you need to do high quality EIAs, environmental impact assessments, and need to look at curtailing during dusk or dawn the turbines if there's a bat or a bird species there that's at risk. So there are responsible ways to do that versus just doing what you think is right. In terms of solar and wind, I mean, we can supply the whole of South Africa's energy need, solar and wind, probably using 1 to 2% of the country's land. So I don't see that as a negative impact. The comment that Gilbert Lekwe made, or the question he asked around Eskom charging more for solar, I think it is. We've got a challenge in terms of our tariff structure because we come out of an old thinking, central thinking, and I agree with Prof. Van Niekerk around that. We sit with a lot of legacy assets. Our tariff structure, I think, is completely wrong in the country, and we don't at this stage say what is the advantage for an individual, let's say household or office building, being linked to the grid, and how much should they pay for the privilege to be linked to the grid. And if it's cheaper for them not to be linked to the grid, then they can go off grid. And I agree with Prof. Van Niekerk that if you're an office building or a residential housing development, you could really be smart in the way you plan your energy use. But I do think that it is a privilege to be grid connected, and it could drive different users. For instance, if you're a high energy user business that welds a lot or use high volumes of energy, then grid connection is great, and then you need to pay for that grid connection or the privilege to be grid connected.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you so much. I wanted to, while you are there, I just wanted to ask you a question in terms of your conclusions. You spoke about how the cycle which should have driven the economy and should have driven renewables was essentially halted by what you phrased as state capture, and how there were literally anti-policies to make sure that incumbents and those that could profit would profit. What would you say in terms of your response, and this is also to Frick as well and anybody else, what would you say currently now that we're working through the post-state capture, or do you see it that we're not post-state capture, or do you feel that there are things that still need to be done? Over to you.
Thanks, Debbie. Yeah, it's a difficult answer because I mean I'm going to again tread on toes. It's very simple for me that the incumbent DMRE minister and department is standing in the way of deregulating the environment in a way that we can build renewable fast and effective. Simple as that. So and they've got their reasons. I mean, some of them are very valid reasons, and it's about organized labor, and it's about the just transition, and it's about coal workers losing their jobs, and a lot of things like that. And the reality is, we're not going to solve those problems by putting obstacles in the way of variable renewable energy being rolled out at the fastest pace that we can, so that we can keep the lights on, keep the economy going. And that's my challenge with where we are. I personally believe if we can just deregulate and stop over-regulating, this thing will drive itself.
If I can maybe add to that, if it's okay.
Go for it.
Right. So we have installed a number of megawatt and up solar solutions, and one specific example that comes to mind, I'm now referring to empowerment, which I think is the right way of doing it, is that we assisted the farmer to use some of his corporate social investment money to erect a community trust, which ultimately benefited all the workers in a rather, I think, exemplary manner. So it was a win-win-win. It was a win for the farmer, because all of a sudden his money worked for his business, energy security and so on. It was a great win for the workers who derive some benefits from in the form of bursaries, training programs and the like. And I'm sure it would also emotionally assist to think that the energy, at least part of the energy supply on this vast factory or storeroom, actually belongs to us, the workers. So that's a right way. But if empowerment or the EE in BEE is beginning to stand for economic entitlement and enrichment of a few, we basically end up where we currently are. It is the cornerstone of corruption. I mean, if you look at any of these big tenders, the 20% is going here and the other 20% is going there. How can we possibly compete in an economic world? And perhaps I'm slightly less diplomatic now, Thomas, if you will allow. I'm a proud South African, but I think we need to be honest with each other. And if I may put my tongue in my cheek, it seems as though 95% of politicians give the rest a bad name, proverbially. So I'm not sure whether we have the wherewithal to run a modern economy. So I think we are at the point we need to do some very deep introspection. This is a modern economy. We need to be modern. We need to be on top of the latest and the greatest in terms of technology and trends and everything else. So we are in a very bad spot, and we're feeling it currently. But let me just say, I have a friend who says every silver lining has a dark cloud. I'm not there. I'm the other way around. Again, if you look at the world context, we are moaning and groaning, but we have the proverbial white bread under the arm. Let's not forget that. And what we do here should not be breaking down what we have, but should really be open, caring, and should also aim towards improving things. It's not about breaking down. And we are still enjoying relatively good and an acceptable access, not acceptable, but great access in terms of the world picture. We just need to make sure that that doesn't go to waste.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to the Q&A section. There are, just to draw people's attention, there are, Jared answered 3 questions. If there's time, we'll go to his answers, but open at the moment. I'm going to go through those. Some are directed at Jared, but potentially Thomas and Frick can answer these. Just a note, Mike Barker said soon apparently there'll be a brief on the grid interactive efficient buildings, RMI and NREL. See this as a mega trend. I don't know if there are any comments from either Thomas or Frick regarding that. Frick, anything from your side?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question? I had a...
Look at the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A section.
Right.
You'll see I'm reading out the questions that are there.
Okay.
You'll see Mike Barker, 12:03 p.m. Have you got it?
Trying to page up there, Etienne.
Q&A at the very bottom. There's a Q&A.
At the very bottom. Okay.
Yes.
Maybe can I, in the meantime, just respond to that?
Go for it.
Focus looking at that, and that's about grid interactive and efficient buildings. And I think yes, that is a mega trend globally. I think the challenge is in South Africa is that we're sitting with millions of people living in shacks, not having access to decent energy, and moving away from electricity back to fossil fuels. To make a living with all the challenges that we've got. So I really think we should sort out our primary energy solutions first, and where we build new mega buildings, absolutely, it should be grid interactive. It should have all the right technologies in it, but I think our challenge is a bit different.
Right. Frick, any response from your side, or can I go on to Mike's next question?
I'm basically happy with the previous answer. I think there needs to be a planned transition, but there's such a lot of scope in terms of free entry by smaller role players that I think that could really assist, especially the smaller businesses who and obviously households, you know, to transition into a new dispensation without a bit of planning would obviously be detrimental.
Thank you. Yeah, the next question again from Mike Barker. South Africa needs an open energy market. We need dynamic pricing to allow all the technologies to compete on equal terms. The question, will the new ITSMO seek to establish a free and fair energy market to allow all to buy and sell green electrons? And whoever responds to this, if you could just explain what ITSMO is. Thank you. Who's to respond?
Let me try that one. So the ITSMO is the independent, it's the independent system and market operator. So that is the part of Eskom that owns the transmission. The system operator physically sits in Germiston in Simmerpan, and they keep the grid going. So they are responsible also to say who will be load shedded where to stabilize the grid to keep us to 50 hertz. Now, if it's the ITSMO, it will be independent transmission and system operator. That means they won't have a board that also looks after generation. And that is very important in terms of a free and open market. So currently, you can't expect the Eskom board, who looks after their transmission, their distribution, and their generation, to be able to be in a position to make a call on whether they curtail, let's say, power from Medupi because it's more expensive. They need to look after all of their assets and their business. If you split it up and there's an ITSMO, that ITSMO's board needs to look after the ITSMO, and therefore they will tend to say, but the ITSMO must buy the cheapest power and supply that over the grid. And that will, in my view, then start the process of an open and free market. I can just say, as business development executive of Earth and Wire, we are busy building a large pipeline of energy projects in which we don't want to compete in the REAP or what we call government auctions. We want to sell our electricity to private off-takers, and that can be corporations, companies, individuals. That will happen. It will happen over time. We will probably be able to sell our first private power next year with the changes in the regulatory environment that has already happened. And that is then a willing seller, willing buyer type of a negotiation. And of course, that willing buyer needs to be able to say what they want to pay for the power, taking into account that the generator also needs to make money. In all of that, the ITSMO will be paid for us using the infrastructure or the grid to supply that electricity through to the customer. And for me, that is a fair model. I think it's part of the model of the future. And I would say it's going to take us 3 to 5 years to get to that model from where we are now.
I could briefly add, I think that was a very thorough answer. And I think if there's any, let's say, economy of scale kind of renewable energy supply somewhere, and if they need to use the grid, then obviously the advantage of the economy of scale will have to be factored against the cost of the grid wheeling. And that's where a decentralized approach might actually be very interesting. But I would also favor an open market approach. We know that governments across the world are not good. And if they want to control or plan central planning, we know doesn't work. We don't need to discuss that. So the less of that, the better. But we understand that the national system needs to be secure and safe.
Thank you. Mike, I've put you on unmute. This is Mike Barker. Is there anything further you'd like to ask around this?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Look, I think we've had some good answers. Clearly, the grid integration is something that would only apply to the larger buildings, I believe. The reason why I asked about the free and open energy market is more about providing an opening for perhaps the SMRs, the small modular reactors, which seem to have a cost of energy that might put it out of the picture at the moment. But if the SMR's capability of producing energy 24/7, 365 was taken into account, the pricing may look a lot different. So I don't know if we could have some comment on how SMRs can play a part. Thank you.
Well, firstly, I think the current drive is to make them competitive in any market, and they will most possibly, probably enter those markets at first where there's a particular niche in terms of distance or remoteness or particular load, constancy of load, etc. So I am not sure whether there will be a need for a subsidy scheme to bring it into the picture, as was the case with renewables at first. I think it should stand on its own feet. It has decades of learning behind it. And the lessons learned in terms of safety and cost, I think, are such that all endeavors are to make it really, really cheap. The big thing is, one of the reasons for nuclear to have been so incredibly expensive has been the challenge or the requirements for safety. Now, I'm not suggesting that should go away, but the new way of thinking is, as opposed to the past where the thinking was, let's show that any accident of a particular nature can happen in 10 to the minus so many years. In the public debate, that always means it can happen, as we saw. And even though the stats across the world looks fine, that idea is it happened. And so hence you must use probabilistic risk assessments and have 3 backup systems of this, 4 of that, 2 times 50 a year, etc., etc. Makes it very expensive. However, with a small modular, the idea is to have inherently safe reactors that can be made in factories. The delivery time is short. That's another big thing for costing in terms of nuclear. And the safety regime here is not show 10 to the minus big incidents. You say, there's an accident, it happened. Now show it has no consequences. That's a totally different way of thinking. So the safety systems here are, you can still call them safety systems, but they're primarily geared towards investment protection. The idea of a walk-away safe reactor is not far-fetched. There were such examples. Ours got scuppered. But our scientists and engineers are working on the very same concepts in other parts of the world. We kind of lost that one. But the technology is out there. We even see business people who do not do this kind of thing for fun, investing in nuclear reactors. For example, the Gates Foundation, I think, invested in nuclear reactor technology, SMRs to be specific.
Thank you so much. I'd like to now go on to Diane Hildebrandt's question. Diane, I'm going to ask the question that you asked, as well as give you ability to talk as well. How would a program to support or encourage the installation of solar water heaters in all households help to relieve pressure on the grid? Would it be an economical alternative to supply energy for water heating in this way, rather than expanding the fossil fuel or nuclear power generating capacity? Is this an easy win?
I'd like to respond to that one, because I've just gone through my own little exercise. I have solar heaters on my roof. The water quality is such that they clog up. It's obviously a good thing to do, especially since they were subsidized some time ago. But what I did here was, in my case, I have some excess solar, and I use the excess solar to store that energy electrochemically in the battery, about 33%, and the other 25% excess I store thermally in a regular geyser, well insulated. I take the heat up to 65 degrees C, and tomorrow morning it's still 5 degrees less, but still quite hard to do a number of showers or bathtubs. So it's almost it's the cheapest battery I have, but it stores the energy thermally. I would say then, if a household does not have access to solar energy, then obviously it makes sense to go for these solar heaters. They are less expensive and they are quite efficient, but there are some issues with them in terms of water quality, the kind of technology that you choose. I know many people who use them for many, many years. They make a lot of sense from an energy point of view, and that will definitely alleviate the burden on the grid. Thanks.
Diane, Tommy, I just like also to comment, and I agree with Frick on this. I installed a solar geyser for myself in 2005 because I thought we're going to have some challenges in the future. I also then started a business in which I installed these things, started manufacturing them. I must tell you, I've lost a lot of t-shirts and a hell of a lot of money in the process. But my solar geyser is still working, and that's great. I do think, however, like Frick said, it depends on the quality of your water, whether you're in a region where there's frost or not, because then you need to have a direct or an indirect system. So if you add all of these things up, it is capital-wise quite expensive, and it gives you an operational saving, and it all depends on your electricity price. I think payback at this stage would probably be 4 years, which is not bad, but still too much money for most people to fork out as a capital installation. It's never easy. I also think from a system operator point of view, it does in a way disable the system operator to use electricity for making hot water or not making hot water at certain times, part of their tools that they have to stabilize the grid. But yeah, if you have the money and you can install one in a region where it makes sense, then do it.
Diane, is there anything you would like to add or you would like to add to that question?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, I also have solar water heaters, and I also have batteries and so on, and run our household like that. I suppose where my thinking came from is probably from years ago when the government was starting to build these new power stations. And the question was, because, I mean, the price we pay for electricity, although we complain about it, it still is not at replacement cost, I believe. And I mean, it's a problem throughout Africa that we're not paying fully for our electricity. Well, you know, it's highly subsidized. So for the owner, it doesn't make perhaps as much sense to put solar water heaters in. But for government, you know, rather to build power stations where the cost of supplying the energy, you know, the real cost in terms of running and paying back capital has to be paid. If it wouldn't be a good idea for them to roll out and support solar water heater systems, if it wouldn't be more economical for the country than talking about putting gas-powered ships in the harbors and, you know, buying, you know, things like that. I suppose that was just my thinking.
I think you're right, Diane, and unfortunately, government always thinks in a centralized way. They can't do unionization of formal labor in the installation of solar water heaters, so they don't like it. But they can use power ships and things like that for rent seeking. So it's unfortunately that reality of the political economy in which we live that causes that. Just to take a step back on the cost of electricity. So if you, for every new solar or wind plant that you will build now, and let's not go to the lowest cost there is, but I would say anything from 65 cents to 90 cents per kilowatt hour from a supply side, depending on where the solar or the wind plant sits, we can supply into the grid. In Pretoria, where I live, I pay R3.20 per kilowatt hour for my electricity from Tshwane, which is much more than that. I know Medupi and Kusile, if you do the calculation, that electricity comes at probably R1.50, R1.60 per kilowatt hour because of the amount of rent seeking that we've seen there and all the other challenges around long build times and mistakes that was made. So going forward, we don't need any subsidy from a solar and wind energy perspective. We, however, do need some form of storage. And currently in our country, we've got enough pump storage to actually, if we now at speed build more solar and wind, we can alleviate load shedding by using those pump storage options much more optimally. But that's not happening. We're designing Again, the RMIPPP program, which was designed by the IPP office and the department, for me looks much more than a rent-seeking, type program than let's solve the energy problem program. And we're struggling with that, and that's just that's the reality of how politicians operate. What we need to do in South Africa as citizens is we need to take the bull by the horns and just do what we need to do. So we need to, without government, proceed and do the right thing, enable the people around us, build energy as quick as we can, energy and storage facilities, so that we can save the country from definite complete blackouts in the future.
Frick, anything from your side?
Yeah, just on the same point, I think this idea of civil society being active citizens and devising a whole chain of new solutions, in that regard, we are not backward. We're actually quite on the forefront. Pretty soon, we're going to make our own water. We can already give water to 100 people from their own sewage for a capital investment of 800,000 rands. At a price competitive with the local water supply. We have these private or Model C schools. It was interesting to learn the other day that we have more private security officials or officers working than the numbers in the army and the police together. So there are a whole range of things where active citizenship is a solution. And it is actually, it comes with a great optimistic view on our situation. We know that transition governments anywhere in Africa have not lasted. So we are in a very difficult situation where the rent-seeking and the other drivers of corruption seems to have infused the above into our network. It is just mind-boggling. So I don't want to be negative. I want to say, in line with what Thomas said, it's very positive to say, yes, we can do this. Just by the way, I know in Europe, they obviously need a lot of hot water. They use hot water, centralized hot water supply to heat up their homes and so on. And even, while many of them have gas burners in the cellar, but they get the municipal hot water. What they do lately is with these large reservoirs, they use renewable energy to heat those up to quite high temperatures, and because of the sheer volume of the water mass and the ratio of volume to surface area, they don't even insulate them additionally. It just stays hot long enough. So there are many such solutions that technology is giving us. Lastly, the idea of a water solar heater is fine, and one can even devise something simple if you don't have frost solutions. I know many such very clever Plan kind of ideas where people have done that. But I do see that our society is in dire need of at least basic electricity. And if you do the math, a few solar cells with some, let's say, massively produced, inexpensive but workable, just for lights, for cell phones, for a bit of entertainment, just to uplift, to infuse that low-hanging technology, to infuse that into our general society. Just think of the educational possibilities. We see so many students relying on cell phones for receiving their learning material. The uptake of solar, of cell phones in Africa, in South Africa, is the highest in the world over the last 10 years. Why? Because our networks, the copper is stolen. We have to rely on thin air, quote unquote, to communicate, which is fine, and so on. So we seem to have circumvented societal problems, but now we must use technology to build our societies. And I think if anybody has spare money, and if you don't have electricity, do a cheap solution for the hot water, but in the meantime, get your solar cells going, because you're going to need that all the time.
Thank you so much. There is a new question. Diane, did you want to respond to something?
Yes, I just wanted to say I agree with Frick. We at the Institute for Social and Health Sciences, which is a UNISA institute, and one of its offices is based at Lenasia. We put up solar panels and wired a sort of shack with 12-volt DC power, and instead of 3-pin plugs, you have USB ports and so on. And we could run, there's cell phones, there's TVs that run off that. You could even get a little fridge. And I agree with you. And if you don't have all the inverters going up to 220 volts, and then much of the appliances we use actually run DC, and then you have to go back down again, which makes it very expensive and inefficient. So I kind of think we could actually look at going very simple DC 12-volt systems where you raise your own power and you just go straight out, and it comes out of your USB ports, which you run things off.
That's really a possibility, but there are also lately some hybrid inverters that are very, very promising, and they cost a fraction. Some of them prize-winning inverters for homes and so on. So but I agree with what you say. At least that's a good starting point. And the next one up would be a smallish home-based hybrid inverter to give you the AC where you really need it, and so on.
Diana, would you just please say where you work, and I was remiss I forgot to ask you previously.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I also forgot. I'm Di Hildebrand. I'm the Distinguished Professor of Future Energy, and I'm based at WITS at the moment. I'm a joint appointment between WITS Business School and the Department of Chemistry, but I was previously at UNISA. But my research area is looking at energy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wanted to then go on to in terms of the Q&As. And just a point to, as we're busy speaking, just a note that there is Vilnius just posted something to say that there's an interesting read about research related to energy. The NSTF award winner, Professor Alexander Quant, in the special annual theme award, Materials for Inclusive Economic Development. If you look online, if you look in the chat, you'll see the link with regards to that. Then there was a comment as well from, I'm just having a look here, from Corin Surridge, who said we should also consider the practicalities and social uptake of what we are suggesting. Corin, would you like to comment further on that? I'm just putting you on talk.
Thank you. Yes, it just popped up and said I'm unmuted. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are unmuted.
Great. No, I was just listening to the discussions and everything that's going on, and I just think that one of the things we need to keep in mind is that things may work in theory and technology-wise, but if you don't have social uptake, you're dead in the water. It will never go anywhere. So I can tell you from experience, I've looked at the hybrid inverters that you're talking about is actually a good solution or potential solution to what we were discussing. But by having a DC, I want to say, what's the right word, home, the expense that you have to go to buy those DC connected appliances and so forth is not within most people's uptake. Also, most people don't see DC as being real energy in terms of, if you go out into the rural areas, they want Eskom. They do not want a battery. So the social uptake is very important to consider here. Yes, it may work from a technical perspective, and we as scientists see these things, and we test them and we make sure that, yes, it can deliver. But when you put it in a real life setting, if the people don't like it, it will not work, even if the technology is working. So I think it's something that we need to consider. And there was, I think it was Prof. Fanikak who was saying, yes, we need to consider how these things are going to work, but we also need to create a social environment where this is a sort of almost a standard practice in South Africa. That's what I took out of what you were saying, Prof. Is that so like everybody has a cell phone, then everybody has a battery pack, that kind of thing. So then it's more socially accepted. But if you turn it into this special thing that people have to go do special stuff to implement, it starts to make it a bit of a gray area in terms of uptake. So it's just a comment that I wanted to make, from a scientific, I would love, my OCD side of me says, this works, take it, put it in, plug it, it works. But the other side of me says, yeah, the the petulant child in me says, I don't want one. So you
All right.
If I may quickly just say,
Before you respond, I just, Corinne, if you
Okay.
could just tell us where you're from so that we have a bit.
Sorry, I should have introduced myself. Karen Surridge from Sanedi. I look after the renewables portfolio in Sanedi.
Thank you.
I'll
Over
shut
to
up. Take a comment. I'll mute.
I'd just like to respond to what Dr. Sari said. Karen, my name is Frik, please. You can leave everything else. I'm sommer net Frik. By the way, yes, I think that the idea originally was to go DC because one could circumvent the AC or directly linked to the solar panels, which deliver DC, and the electronics would be relatively inexpensive. The idea was to make it economically palatable for NJ households. However, at that time, roughly when it was quite, let's say, pushed, the typical inverter required the MPPT charger and so on and so forth. Nowadays, as I said, with the hybrid inverters, they're really inexpensive, and they come with a 5 to 10 year warranty and so on and so forth, depending on what they can do. But for a typical household, I think that's the way to go.
Just a comment at this stage. As a civil engineer, when I sort of retired 7 years ago, then became a politician, I'm listening to everybody's comments. But let me just, I see Frik is laughing. Yes, Frik. I was the assistant town engineer for Potchefstroom way back. So I have a lot of local authority experience. But I have 5 days to...
Come back.
Well, anyway, yes. The issue is that within 5 days, I won't be a politician anymore. I had 7 years as a stint as a local authority councillor, a ward councillor. Politics is not for sissies. And if you listen, and I just want to change the tack slightly. If you listen to the debates of the past 2 weeks in the upcoming elections, it's often about houses and not about energy, etc., etc. And so often the issues that come up are not, we cannot solve it at local authority level. Mentioning that, the Western Cape province decided to have, I think, 4 or 5 local authorities where they will try to roll out renewable energy projects and make the local authorities less dependent on buying from Eskom. Let's put it that way. But there's another elephant in the room, and that is if everybody goes off grid, you can close the municipalities because there's still streets to build, parks to clean, a lot of non-revenue type of services that in one way or another has to be funded. Now, the elephant in the room is that we really need a total revamp of the funding models for local authorities as well. That's just something to chew on because if you all go off grid and I reuse all my grey water and recycle it and etc., so I don't pay for water anymore, or not that much. I go off grid with electricity. I'm not sure who's going to pay for repairing the road or the streets in front of my house. So it's another debate, but just to throw that into the pot as well.
Well, frankly, we're already repairing our own streets. The business chamber has jumped in.
Not in Hermanus.
But I think the question is, if salaries are in effect social grants, why not call them that and take the job, do it properly? There needs to be some level of merit in terms of who's appointed, not loyalty based on whatever, but because there is a capable person wanting to work, being responsible. So if that's not the case, why call a salary a social grant?
Jancy, there for you. There's another discussion forum for next year, and I'll mute myself.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to the questions. I also think in terms of just for a more balanced debate, if we were to extend around the discussions around, how government's working, we've spoken a lot about corruption. We've spoken a lot about where there hasn't been proper capability, but there are spaces where government is working, and it would be great if there was someone who would talk to that position as well, and not just about all the negatives. So if you don't mind, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the questions now, or if there's someone in the audience that wishes to speak to the opposite of what you're saying, because you're speaking very specifically about where there are fallouts with regards to government, whereas I know with my own experience in government, it's certain departments do actually work, and do not hate me for saying that, but they really do, or certain levels of department. Okay, so let's just go back to the Q&A. Eleanor Richardson, who I'll also put on to allow to talk, it has been answered, but she had a question saying, I'm very interested in putting solar PV on my house, but am battling to get the necessary information from my municipality. Any thoughts from the panelists on how to manage these situations? For any of the attendees listening and participating at this point, from very specific questions like this to larger thematic and trend questions, please feel free to discuss. This is great that it can go as specific as this. So please feel free to add these type of questions. Thomas Garner has responded. You'll see on the Q&A. He said, please contact SAPVIA, the South African PV Industry Association, to assist you. They would be able to support you with the right installers and process to follow. Eleanor, I've put you on allow to talk. Is there anything further you'd like to ask?
No, that's great. And yeah, David raised a lot of the arguments that I was going to raise as well. The other argument I would raise is that there's a lot of fear in all the municipality people I speak to. What if I get it wrong? What if I'm punished for getting something wrong, making the wrong decision, so it's easier to make no decision at all? That would be number one. I'm actually on this call because I am the current chair of the South African VAT Assessment Association. And just to relate back to something somebody said earlier, just put solar and PV and wind everywhere. We're already seeing so many bats killed by wind energy that we may see environmental collapses and agricultural collapses. So it's not just everywhere. It's very specific places where you can put it. Already in the Eastern Cape, we're seeing issues, big issues. So yeah, 2 questions, and thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah?
I could quickly just say, I think 10, 15 years ago, there were a dozen or 2 solar suppliers in South Africa. Today, there are more than 2,500. So every town basically has access to a solar supply. If not a normal electrician, there shouldn't be any other problem. There are some rules about not feeding back into the network, and that's it, that the electrician would know. So if I wanted to do anything like that, I would just simply look at a number of solar suppliers, get the best quality, best price, and perhaps Google around, read around, ask people with experience. And usually every town has got a number of those. You probably have in your circle of friends, many people who've done it already. So it's not as though the municipality needs to be consulted to do what you want to do on your piece of land.
Okay, super.
Or contact your local councillor.
I have tried that. He didn't know a thing about it. It was kind of, what is solar PV?
You wouldn't say yay or nay.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's absolutely great. I'm going to go to the questions and answers that have been answered, particularly by Jared, in case any of the other presenters would like to add to that. There's some very good questions. Oh, sorry, Yancy.
Sorry. I just want to interject something there. I think that it's clear from my interactions with other people and also from this discussion forum that there's a need for consumer information. And I don't know of any central place, any website that provides that kind of information, a comparison of your options and what you should consider, and how the expense as well. I think that there is a need for that kind of concentration of the available knowledge. I mean, yes, you know, I've got someone, a relative who's quite good with these things, and I'll ask him. But it's not everybody that has a relative that can do that, or someone on the WhatsApp group. So I think there's a real need there.
Thank you very much.
Add there, possibly, Debbie, there's unfortunately, business is business. Business is business. And the public at large sometimes battle. I know I battle to get the right information. So Jansie, you're so right. There are so many offerings on the market. Buy this, buy this. Our product is the best. And that becomes a major problem. I stepped back from buying a solar water geyser way back, just exactly because of that problem. I looked at the cost. I looked at the possible savings. I looked at the problems that I might have if a big hailstorm comes across Roodepoort when I lived there. They couldn't guarantee me that the glass won't break. So eventually I worked out it's not worth my while. I will just stay electrical, if you like. So you're quite right. And it's going to be very difficult to have a central point and 100 suppliers actually competing for my product is the best, my price is the best. But that is a real problem in everyday life. But it would be fantastic if sort of a basic information pamphlet or a website could be where it's not biased towards buy my product or etc. Some advice. Thanks.
There are dozens of websites with this kind of information.
Where?
On the web. Google it. I guarantee you I can demonstrate it in half a second if you like, but we don't have the time for that. Really, just Google it and go away from the typical supplier, but there are neutral information. Go to Wikipedia if you like, you know, that kind of thing. There's a lot of neutral fora where this information is described. And then I would say go to a professional who is not a particular company representative. Your local electrician would know about a number of options and can explain them to you.
I think the problem actually is partly, Frick, that there is so much information on the web, and that people whose business it isn't, you know, to be finding out about electricity systems find it absolutely daunting. So, but thank you for that advice. And can you send us or post in the chat now some of those websites that you can recommend?
Okay, I'll quickly do the Google search. I'll do the link.
Fantastic.
Oh, Frick, thank you so much. I'm going to now just go on to the questions that were already answered by Jared that Thomas and Frick may want to add to. If you look on the answered section of the Q&A at the bottom, and please also any of the attendees or panelists that want to ask any questions, just use the raise hand function. Question 1 was, how seriously is nuclear being considered? This seems to be the most logical solution. Jared responded by saying nuclear is still in an official policy position, included qualitatively in the IRP 2019. Unfortunately, aside from other compelling reasons, the lead time for a new build nuclear program will mean capacity will be unlikely to come online prior to 2030 and will not alleviate the immediate crisis. Any comments from Thomas or from Frick?
I think if we think logically of how long it will take to provide a solution, as I said in my discussion, nuclear plants typically took 10 years to construct. They intended to take 5 years. The small modular reactors are indicated or hope to take 2-3 years or so, and even to be delivered on site. But they, in the prototype stage, that's not a solution. Conventional power stations are also not a solution. They take long, and they they use fossil fuel. We don't want any more of that. So logically, what can we do? We can fix what we have, maintain properly, bring into action, fix the ones that should have been online a long time ago, which were partially scuppered by ineptitude and politics and so on. Sorry, Debbie, this is the part where I may say it didn't go so well. And then, so if we can't work with what we have, and so the writer and his team are really doing their absolutely best to get that right, get on track what we have. Number two, get some emergency solutions. For example, what can you do overnight? Within a month or 2 months' time, you can probably put a ship on the harbor and run some gas turbines or something like that. We have a few gas turbines, but that has limits. I still maintain that a short-term solution is to help yourself. And if you know, the regulation is still such that you can't be too ambitious as the likes of some companies would be able to do. But even a solar plant, a large solar plant, takes quite a number of months to erect. The EIA process, the geological test, all that kind of thing. But at least you're talking there maybe a year or two to get a large plant going. But you can do within weeks, months, a fairly sizable, let's say, microgrid setup for a gated community, a shopping mall, your own house, that kind of thing. In actual fact, your own house could be done within a week's time. So, but the idea of the so-called integrated resource plan, long-term planning with a 10-year forecast and so on, I've seen industrialists saying that nowadays, if you need a lot of energy in a particular position, you would need to at least consider procuring your own power system. It would be competitive. And then hopefully by that time, you could feed back into the grid to make it more palatable from a commercial point of view, because you would have excess power, and to put that back into the grid would make sense. So that was a long answer. It depends on the scale, the size, but I think if we can't fix what we have and revert to other expensive OPEX technologies such as gas turbines, then let's just do more renewables. It seems as simple as that.
Frick, thank you so much. And also just on your point about, you said sorry for saying that this didn't work. I 100% support the honesty that and the discussion, both from yourself and Thomas and everyone else. It was just a case of not focusing too much and getting, not kind of going too far down that road of just discussing what worries us.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So please don't think that I'm in any way wanting you to hold back. I see that Davi wants to say something. Go for it, Davi.
I saw a message that Thomas has to go. And before we left with panelists, maybe I would like to say a special thanks to Thomas and Frick. Frick, you don't need to drop off. We still have a couple of minutes left. But just to say thank you to Thomas for contributing. It's been a quite exciting discussion, raising maybe more questions than answers. And I'm directing this at Jansi. But I sincerely hope to see you back in future with some of the related topics. And we now know more or less what this animal is we have to eat. And it's not an elephant. So I think it's much bigger. But thank you, Thomas. If you have to leave, we appreciate your input. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that, David. Yeah, just a closing remark from my side is that technology-wise, we've got all the solutions. We need to get the political will, and we need to get the perseverance to drive through and do what we need to, what we know we need to do. That's as simple as that. And I'm not a government basher at all, but sometimes we also need to say what actually did go wrong, and how to fix it. And we can't fix it with technology on its own.
Yeah. Thomas, thank you very much for your excellent presentation, and for calling a spade a spade. It was really appreciated. I liked that we had the academic point of view, the very, very knowledgeable point of view from Professor van Niekerk, but we also had the more private point of view where you're drawing on experience and what you've been doing. I'm oversimplifying by saying that. I mean, you know, you both come from very knowledgeable and insightful backgrounds, but we really appreciate it that you were here as well to bring that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, and take care. We'll chat again. Okay.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yancy, there are some more questions from the Q&A that we can respond to. It's already 1:15. Are you happy to go through one or two more, or would you like to resolve now? Would you like to conclude now?
No, I think we can go through them. We're booked till one.
Wonderful. Okay, then let me continue.
Let's just go through two, but let's just a couple of minutes before past, just sum up, or rather wind up. Thanks.
Thanks, Davi. Okay, so I'm now looking at Etienne Rubber's question. He said, and I'm having a look, and I'm going to. I hope Etienne's still here. Doesn't look like he is. Let me have a look quickly. No, it doesn't look like he's still here. Okay, so he said the RMIPP will likely continue to be marred with legal challenges by DNG and Car Power. Hope I'm saying that right. They could be sour losers and may want to torpedo the program. There will be further delays to the emergency program. What is the likelihood that the REIPP round 5 will be expanded by 2,000 megawatts to replace the RMIPP? Jared responded by saying, probably not a bad idea to expand and accelerate the REIPP. At the same time, ensure the bilateral market, EG/DG, is freed of any bottlenecks, as this capacity is likely to come online significantly quicker. Any responses from Frick, Davi, anyone on the floor?
Well, it's a question which is slightly laden with uncertainty, if not a lot. I wish our politicians would listen, as you asked some time ago. It seems as though we have obvious solutions. So it's a political answer to the question, and I'm not a politician. So I don't know what the outcome of that is. You know, it makes sense always to start with efficiency programs. It's the first thing to do, an exemplary. Debbie talking about great stuff. That was an exemplary program. An initiative by government. Can I also say DSI is probably the crown in our jewel, the jewel in our crown, I should say, for running a storage program and for running a renewable program and for doing things like that. They're really up there. But if you look at our budget in terms of RNI, they're working with very little. That's again a bigger, more complex question. So efficiency is fine. We already argued today from various angles. And just by the way, Yancy, I don't want to oversell myself, but I'm actually also involved in installing rather big solar systems in my private capacity. But nevertheless, as long as you don't see me as a pure academic in that regard. But nevertheless, so rolling out renewable energy seems to be the next thing to do. So the impediments, it's not as though we have to procure anything, we have to take decisions. And obviously there needs to be some circumspection in terms of the effects on a big system if you allow more and more energy to come from renewables and that kind of thing. We all understand that. But where there's a will, there is a way.
Debbie, from my point, I think with anything to do with government, you have to persevere. We cannot stop. It's for example at ProSet, we've been on the go, Yancy, 20 years or about that. NSTF 25 years plus. You have to persevere. There's no easy solution to convince governments except to keep on going. And for the private sector, for me, is to lead the way and actually demonstrate it can be done. And then obviously, as I say, there are some inherent fears around government structures, let me call it that, about how do we replace the income if the private sector sort of runs away with all the profits. Now that's not what it's all about, but that's an issue, and we have to get to a point where we can make sure that we can still do our roads, but also have cheaper or sustainable electricity, etc., etc. So that model, I believe they are looking at local authority funding models, but it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be cheap in the long run to get everything done. But perseverance, that's my view. Make sure that at every place where we talk, we actually bring this issue up, and pray. I think prayer is something that we've got to invest in.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no. Yeah.
Sorry, are we still discussing, or was that a closing remark?
No. We're discussing. It was my intervention.
Okay. I wanted to just take your hand in, and also in Debbie's hand. I mean, I've been accused of being an arch optimist, and I think South Africans still being in South Africa are, in their hearts of hearts, they have deep roots and a wide base. This is why we're here. We want to make things better. But I think there's something else which is probably going to assist us, and that's the fear of the fiscal cliff. And the fiscal cliff is not only looming nationally, it's actually already happened in so many municipalities. And just for those who don't know, the fiscal cliff is defined as that point where grants and salaries of public salaries and grants and interest paid, when that approaches the total amount of tax earnings, there you need 100% mark there. Basically, you have no money to fix a pothole. You can only pay those amounts. Now, in a certain sense, that's already happened across the country in so many municipalities, where the kind of burden is just such that we cannot now do the obvious things. Our labor legislation makes it difficult to act quickly, and so on. But the blessing in disguise there is that everybody, irrespective of political background, language, creed, etc., are just fed up with no services. By the same token, if we run into fiscal cliff domain internationally, the IMF will tell us what to do. Ask Greece, I know that is feared by the politicians, but it calls for a bit of sanity in the whole process. You can't carry on. But more of the same is not going to give us anything better. And there are, unfortunately, people who are trying to just delay that point of making hard decisions. And again, Debbie, not bashing politicians, but politicians are not famous for making unpopular decisions. The thing is, though, if the populace is changing their mind, then we're getting into tandem with reality. And I think that's beginning to happen slowly. And again, you will see the arch optimist in me. Maybe there's a bit of naivety. But what other option do we have to become real?
Thank you so much. I'm having, thank you both, Dawie and Frick, for your responses there. I see that it is now approaching the end of the time, so I'm going to hand over to Jansi and to Dawie to conclude and to say thank yous. Thank you from me.
South Africans are people who can persevere, they can fast bait, and who's also pioneering people from all of us are pioneers, wherever we come from, and innovators in a big way. And that's something that we have to exploit. Problem with us sometimes is that we cannot bring our innovations through to the point where it's actually in a practical form. But I think Frick actually summed it up quite nicely. Let's all do what in our area, what we can. And And let's reconvene. Jansi, there's another session tomorrow, which I unfortunately cannot attend. But let's reconvene on some of these topics and explore further in terms of communication to our residents, our public out there, and to government on the other side. Let's just persevere and get on with it. Debbie, for you, from my side as well, thank you so much for stepping in. It's so much easier just to watch and interrupt than watching everything and trying to keep order. To all the staff, Vilna, Siyabonga, and all the others, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who's been on board for this very exciting trip this morning. Thank you so much.
Can I have the last word, Davi?
Of course.
Of course. I just want to thank Frick for his excellent and very informative presentation.
Thank you very much, Jansi.
Very much, Frick. Really appreciate it. And I did not mean to imply that you're only an academic.
No, I was pulling your leg. Don't worry about that.
No, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. All the best.
It's a bit late to say this now, but we always send out a token of appreciation to our speakers. It's a book, and it's a surprise. And now the other two speakers have missed out on that news. I better announce it at the beginning tomorrow. But now you know, Frick, you can.
Thanks very much.
First.
All the best, and thank you in advance, and all the best. Thank you for the lovely audience, and thank you for the very open and frank way of discussing. It's almost like there are no hidden agendas. It's just an open, free discussion. Congratulate you on that, Jansi and team. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Potchefstroom.
Yes. All the best. Keep well.
Okay, you keep well. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.